So the biggest takeaway I want you to remember is sometimes those flare-ups, it's not what you're doing that's the problem, it's how much of it you're doing. Can we alter volume before you even change anything else? Can we alter volume? And let's see what that does to your pain and your issues, and then we can go from there. So hopefully that simplifies this a little bit more for you. Again, everybody is going to be on their own journey, and everybody's going to respond to different things when they are in a flare-up. This is just one piece of the puzzle that we want to pay attention to, but hopefully it's a bit more encouraging to know that it doesn't mean you have to stop everything. It doesn't mean you can't do the things you love. Sometimes we just have to cut back a bit on the things that we love temporarily so that your body can come out of the flare-up and then we can rebuild effectively, which is ultimately going to help make sure that this problem goes away and doesn't come back. So as always, if you guys have any questions on this, if you have stories to share of things that you've tried that have worked really well, drop them below in the comments. Let's get that conversation going. And I can't wait to see you back here next week on Unchoreographed. Have a great day, everybody. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Unchoreographed podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jenna Loewer, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about flare-ups because I know a lot of you are out there struggling with flare-ups for your hip impingement or your labral tears, and sometimes you just don't know what to do for them. And so we're going to talk today about the idea of volume and how that relates to the flare-ups that you're having. Here's what I want you to know. Sometimes your hip isn't responding poorly to what you're doing. It's responding to how much of it you're doing. So as an example, if you are out there walking 20,000 steps every single day, even if you're doing all your pain relieving exercises and all the strength training and all the stuff you're supposed to be doing, whether it's a physio that gave it to you or just things you've done on your own, but you're also walking 20,000 steps, it can be really hard to tell, are those things, those pain relieving things working? Or are you just overloading your hip so much that it keeps sending it up into a flare-up every single time, no matter what else it is that you're doing? And so the key here is, can we learn to better manage volume around our activities so that we can actually get a little bit more pain relief in the hip, the inflammation starts to reduce, and your hip actually is in a much calmer state? Again, it's not always what you're doing, it's how much of it you're doing that creates the flare-up. Everybody has a threshold or a baseline pain or activity level, I should say, a baseline activity level that they can tolerate. And if you accidentally go over that threshold, that's often what sends you into the flare-up. So it might mean that you become inflamed again, or you keep re-inflaming it every single time you walk those 20,000 steps. It might be that you went back to playing pickleball too early. I just had this happen with a client this week, went back to playing pickleball and it felt okay. So then he automatically went back to pickleball every single day, and that was too much. It might be that you are going from doing just the prescribed exercises on one day to doing the entire week's worth of prescribed exercises in one workout sitting. You just might be doing too much, right? It may not be that what you're doing is the exercises itself or the activity itself is what's causing the problem. You're just doing too much of it. So if we can start by just cutting back a little, sometimes you don't even have to change anything else, but you just cut back a little bit on those high volume activities, see what happens to your pain. It's really hard to sometimes tell what is triggering you, right? Is it the walking itself that's triggering you, or is it because you walked 20,000 steps? So if you can start to figure out, well, hey, today I only walked 5,000 or 6,000 steps, and you know what? That didn't hurt. Okay, well, I know I'm okay with at least that much then. That's not flaring my pain up. I didn't go over that load threshold today. So the next day, or maybe not the next day, maybe I do that for a little while. Usually I tell people to do it, a couple times, 2-3 times, just to make sure it's not a fluke. And then it doesn't start to add up. And so maybe the next time I shoot for 8,000 steps, and you know what? I'm still good. 10,000 steps, I'm still good. 12,000 steps, oop, now I got a problem. Does that mean I can't walk at all? No, it just means that somewhere between 10 and 12,000 steps seems to be my threshold. So if I know I was okay at 10,000 steps, I'm going to keep my steps at 10,000 for a little while. I'm going to keep that load and volume well managed for a little while I have time to build up my strength in other ways and make sure I'm working on those calming activities and I'm retraining my movement patterns. And I'm going to keep my steps consistent until I feel like, you know what, I actually am getting stronger. This is getting a little easier. My pain is down. Now I'm going to go ahead and start to increase a little bit again. I'm not going to jump all the way to 20K steps because that is a really big volume increase, but I can start to progressive overload it a little bit. So maybe I go to 12, maybe I go to 11 even, right? 12, and I build back up from there. Once you can find what your load tolerance is, or I should say volume tolerance, what you can figure out what your volume tolerance is, it becomes a whole lot easy to continue moving and doing the things that you love without accidentally flaring it up every single time. Because the fact of the matter is, if your hip is stuck in inflammation, no matter what you do, no matter what strength exercises, movement retraining, calming exercises you do, if you keep stressing it to the point that it keeps flaring and it stays stuck in this chronic loop of inflammation, none of that stuff matters. None of those things will work. So it's really important that you make sure that you first figure out, how do I calm my hip? And that very often for a lot of people requires some volume management. Walking is one example of things that I see. I mentioned another one, which was like going back to your activity too much, too quick. So again, this client that I was working with this week, it was pickleball. He was in a really bad flare up. And then once the flare up went away, he was like, you know what, I'm going to just go ahead and jump back into pickleball. We hadn't really gotten to a lot of the strength stuff yet. We hadn't really worked on change of direction or speed or, power. But he felt like, I really want to try this again. And so he went back one day and it didn't hurt, which then meant he went back every single day. And then that volume started adding up and he was back in a flare up when I saw him. And so the reason that happens is because it was too much too fast and the body wasn't well trained or prepared for it. And so you just jump back into these things and the volume is just too great for what your body has been prepared to handle. And so in this instance, we just pulled back on the pickleball. We went back to the basics, back to the calming exercises, and that worked. He was out of pain. And now the key was, we have to now take that and we have to, before we just jump back into pickleball, we need to make sure that you are strong enough and you are prepared for that activity. That's another just example for you guys. I'll give you another real life example. I have another client who reached out this week and mentioned, oh, I went to the gym and it keeps flaring every time I go to the gym. And then she kind of mentioned casually, well, I actually have been doing, I know you prescribed 2 different sets of exercises, but I've been doing all of those exercises every time I go to the gym because I figured, hey, I was going to the gym already. I just want to do all of these things and get them all out of the way while I'm here. Is that okay? And my response to that was, probably not if we know it's flaring you. And there's 2 reasons that could be. Number one is the volume of that day is too high. It's too many excessive demands, too much load for your hip. It's overloading you. It's keeping you stuck in inflammation. And it just flares every single time. The other reason that potentially is causing some problems is the way that those exercises were programmed were by body groups. So generally when I program exercises for people, I split them up into muscle groups. One thing that I really like to do for my hip clients is split it into front body, back body. The other way people will call this is like a push and a pull day. So basically we work all the muscles on the front side of the body on one of the workouts, and then the next workout, everything on the back, so that it splits up which muscle groups you're working and when. Number one, that's going to give you rest in between. So like, my quads get a little bit of a break because the next time I go to the gym, I'm going to work my hamstrings a little bit more. So it kind of offsets the overload a little bit. But the other thing that's really helpful for, especially if you're somebody that's still having flare-ups, is it very easily tells us what's flaring it up. If I know that I've split your exercises into muscle groups, and every single time you do your squat day or your quad exercises or your hip flexor exercises, it flares it up, that tells me something. There's something going on with the way that you're moving on those movements that are programmed into that day that's causing the flare up, where when you do your deadlift day and you do your glute strengthening exercises, that that's not a problem. Those are totally fine. So there's something happening when you flex your hip versus when you extend your hip. And that is really easy now for me as a physiotherapist to be able to help start to modify what you're doing and the workload that you're doing and which exercises are going to be more beneficial for you, because it's going to help keep you out of a flare up. Or you can start to note that pattern yourself. If you're having pain and a flare up every time you go to the gym, no matter which set of exercises are going on, then again, that's something different that we have to look at. Maybe it's the amount of load that you're using. Maybe it is the amount of exercises that you have. Maybe it's just that you are doing weighted exercises before you're ready, and no matter which way you're moving, your movement patterns aren't quite there yet. Your hip is inflamed no matter what. All of these things give us so much information. But what the biggest takeaway here is that it doesn't mean you have to stop everything. We just need to modify and pull back in certain areas so that we can then figure out what is the problem. What's the holdup? Where's the leak? Once we know where the problem is, it's a whole lot easier to start to solve it, because I can then start to say, well, these things feel okay and this doesn't. This amount of walking feels okay and this amount doesn't. So I'm just going to go ahead and modify temporarily to the thing that doesn't hurt. And I'm going to do that for a little while I build up my strength and my range of motion and my pain control and all of that stuff. And then I'm going to start to progressively overload again to get myself back to the level that I want to be at. So we modify these things, but we modify them temporarily. It's not meant to be a forever. It's just meant to be so that it stops causing you to go into this chronic inflammation cycle so that nothing is making your hip feel good. Because again, if it's inflamed, sometimes no matter what you do, it still hurts because you're still pushing through that inflammation and that pain. So we pull back a little, we get your hip to actually calm down, and then we start to build a progressive overload from there. Walking, I think, honestly, is probably the biggest example that I see with this. I'd say this is the most common thing where like most of my clients will be like, well, I stopped running, I stopped, biking, I stopped playing pickleball, I stopped doing like the weight training and doing all the big things, but I still love to walk. So I've been walking every day. And at first I'm like, okay, yeah, that's great. Like, let's talk about how long are you walking? How much are you walking? And they're like, well, I walk my dog every day, 3 times a day for an hour each. Okay, that's awesome. I'm sure your dog needs it. I'm sure you need it, right, for your mental health. But is 3 hours of walking every single day too much on your hip because you are still in an active flare-up? Maybe it didn't used to be too much on your hip and it was fine, but currently you are in a flare-up. You are inflamed. Is 3 hours of walking every single day the best thing for your hip right now in this moment to get you to a calmer state? This is an easy fix. What happens if instead of taking hour-long walks, you take 30-minute walks? Maybe you go to 2 30-minute walks a day and you see, what does that do to my pain? Again, I'll give you another real life example with my client. She was doing 3 30-minute walks a day. And so we said, okay, keep it at 3 walks, but cut them down to 15 minutes at a time. And let's see what happens. And you know what happened? She did not have pain anymore. It completely stopped the flare-ups from happening. And so that's, again, really important to note, because we didn't take the walking away. She loves walking. She's got to walk her dog. It's good for her mental health. I don't want to take that away from her. But if I can just cut it back a little, let's cut it in half and let's see what that does to your pain. Now you can keep doing that, but it's also not sending you into a flare-up every single time. That's what we want to encourage. And now from here, now we've got something to work with, because now I can say, okay, we did 3 15-minute walks. You've been doing that for 2 weeks. You're getting stronger. Your pain hasn't flared up since then. Let's go ahead and increase those walks to 20-minute walks now. And let's see what happens to your pain. And let's do that for a little while. And then we're going to increase to 25 minutes. We're going to see how that goes. And we're just building up from there. It's all about progressive overload. This is the same thing as like when you go to the gym, you don't go from lifting 10 pounds to bench pressing 200 pounds. There's a whole lot of in between there. If you tried to bench 200 pounds, what's going to happen? Well, you're either not going to be able to move it or you're going to hurt your shoulder or something. You're going to hurt something, right? There's a whole lot of in between there. It doesn't mean you don't bench press, right? You're still going to bench press. You're just going to do it at a volume and a load that your body is capable of. Sometimes we don't think about walking the same way, but we have to think about it the same way. Another example would be running, right? We don't go from running 1 mile to running a marathon. There's a whole lot of in between there. It doesn't mean you don't train for the marathon. You keep training. Just because you can't run 26 miles right now doesn't mean you never run again. It just means you start with a mile and you do a couch to 5K and then you do a 10K and you build up, right? You build up your load tolerance every single week. And we think about that a lot, when there's not pain or injury involved. And for some reason, then when there's pain or injury involved, we sometimes forget that, like, hey, my body just isn't prepped for this demand, so it keeps hurting. And so our default is, well, I'm not going to do that activity. I'm going to go back to nothing. Or sometimes it's, I'm going to just keep pushing through because I'm frustrated and I just want to do this. And that's not serving you well. It's creating either a constant flare up, or if you're completely stopping and resting, it's never helping your body adapt. So all we need to do is we need to pull back. We need to find the volume that is manageable for you. And then we need to build and progressively overload from there so that now that activity is helping you instead of sending you into a flare up every single time. So all we need to do is we need to pull back. We need to find the volume that is manageable for you. And then we need to build and progressively overload from there so that now that activity is helping you instead of sending you into a flare up every single time.